The Kragoth warships surrounded the planet, annihilating the Zephyrian defenses with merciless barrages of superheated plasma. Captain Grayson Reeves gritted his teeth as the distress call cut off abruptly, the final screams of the alien commander still echoing in his ears. The UES Odyssey, the only human ship within light years, hung silently in space, dwarfed by the enemy fleet. Reeves had seen the tactical scans. He knew his small science vessel stood no chance against the warships of the Kragoth Empire. The ruthless aliens sought to enslave the galaxy and eradicate all who opposed them. Trillions had already perished, entire species wiped from existence. The Zephyrians would be next. So unless Reeves intervened, the Odyssey lacked weapons but carried an elite squad of Space Marines, humanity's finest warriors. Genetically enhanced and equipped with powered assault armor, they were one of mankind's greatest triumphs. But they numbered only 50. The Kragoths numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Reeves had to act fast. Reinforcements were days away. The Zephyrians would all be dead or enslaved by then. He had to hold off the Kragoths long enough for the main human battle fleet to arrive, long enough to save billions of lives and turn the tide of galactic war. The odds of success were nearly zero. The price of failure was extinction. But when faced with overwhelming odds and unwinnable battles, humans always found a way. It was time to show the galaxy what humanity could do. Back on Earth, Admiral Elias Vance slammed his fist on the console as Reeves's desperate plea crackled through the comm system. The transmission was garbled, but the message was clear. The Zephyrians were on the verge of annihilation, and the Odyssey was their only hope. Vance spun to face his aide. "Notify the Fifth Fleet. I want every available ship prepped and ready to jump within the hour." "Sir, the Council." "I'll deal with the Council. Get me a channel now." Vance stormed into the conference room, his uniform still askew. The Council members glared at him, their disapproval etched into every line of their faces. Councillor Graves spoke first, his voice dripping with disdain. "Admiral, you have no authority to deploy the fleet without our approval." "I have the authority to defend Earth and her allies from any threat. The Kragoth are not our concern," Graves cut in. "This is not our war." Vance slammed his hand on the table, silencing the room. "Not our war? The Kragoth have slaughtered trillions. They won't stop at the Zephyrians. If we don't stand now, we'll be next." Murmurs rippled through the Council, but Vance pressed on. "The Zephyrians are an advanced species, with technology that could revolutionize our understanding of the universe. An alliance with them could change everything. But beyond that, it's the right thing to do. We cannot stand by while innocents are slaughtered." The debate raged for hours, with Vance passionately arguing his case. Some councillors wavered, but others remained steadfast in their opposition. As the deliberations dragged on, the Odyssey and her crew fought for their lives. The Space Marines, led by the indomitable Sergeant Hawkins, launched daring raids on the Kragoth ships, planting explosives and sabotaging key systems. Reeves directed the Odyssey's movements, using the ship's superior speed and maneuverability to evade the enemy's fire. The Zephyrians rallied behind Commander Zorian, inspired by the humans' bravery. They launched their own ships, harrying the Kragoth flanks and drawing fire away from the Odyssey. Together, the humans and Zephyrians held the line, but they were vastly outnumbered. Every hour brought more Kragoth reinforcements, and the defenders were pushed to the brink. On the Odyssey's bridge, Reeves gripped the console as another explosion rocked the ship. Alarms blared and smoke filled the air, but he kept his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Shield status," he barked. "Shields at 15%, the tactical officer reported. "We can't take much more of this." Reeves gritted his teeth. "Reroute all auxiliary power to shields, and get me Vance on the line." The Admiral's face appeared on the screen, haggard and strained. "Captain, what's your status?" "We're holding, sir, but barely. Please tell me you have good news." Vance hesitated, glancing off-screen. When he spoke, his voice was heavy. "The Council is still deliberating. I'm doing everything I can, but—" Reeves's heart sank, but he forced himself to nod. "I understand, sir. We'll hold as long as we can." As the transmission cut out, Reeves turned to his crew. They were battered and bruised, but the fire in their eyes remained undiminished. "You heard the Admiral," Reeves said. "We're on our own, but we're not giving up. The Zephyrians are counting on us, and we will not let them down. We'll fight to the last man, the last bullet, the last breath, because that's what humans do. We stand, we fight, and we win, no matter the odds. So let's show these Kragoth bastards what we're made of." A cheer went up from the crew, and Reeves felt a surge of pride. They were outgunned and outnumbered, but they were human, and that was enough. The battle raged on, the Odyssey and her allies fighting with everything they had. They were battered and bloodied, but they would not yield. They would hold the line, no matter the cost. Because the alternative was unthinkable. The council chamber erupted with a cacophony of voices as Admiral Vance made his final impassioned plea. He had laid out the facts, the dire situation faced by the Zephyrians and the brave crew of the Odyssey. He had appealed to their sense of duty, their humanity and their self-interest. And now, as the debate reached its crescendo, he could see the tide turning in his favor. One by one the councillors cast their votes. Some still held out, their faces etched with doubt and fear. But in the end, the ayes had it. The UESC would send reinforcements to the Zephyrian system. They would stand with their allies against the Kragoth threat. Vance sagged with relief, but only for a moment. He knew that the real work was just beginning. The fleet would take time to assemble, to arm and provision for the long journey ahead. Every minute counted, and he could only hope that Reeves and his crew could hold out long enough for help to arrive. Light years away, the Kragoth fleet surged forward, a tidal wave of destruction bearing down on the Zephyrian homeworld. Their ships blackened the sky, their weapons charged and ready to rain death upon the planet below. On the bridge of the Odyssey, Captain Reeves watched the tactical display with growing dread. The Kragoth were coming, and they were coming in force. The Zephyrian defenses were already buckling under the onslaught, their ships blasted to fragments by the relentless barrage. "We have to do something," Reeves growled, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "We can't just sit here and watch them die." Commander Zorian, the leader of the Zephyrian forces, nodded grimly. "Agreed, but what can we do? We're outnumbered and outgunned." Reeves stared at the display, his mind racing. The Kragoth fleet was vast, but it was not invincible. Every armada had a weak point, a vulnerability that could be exploited, and then he saw it. "There," he said, pointing to the screen. "The command ship. If we can take that out, it'll disrupt their coordination, maybe buy us some time." Zorian frowned. "It's heavily guarded. We'd never get close enough." "We don't have to," Reeves said, a plan forming in his mind. "We just have to get close enough to launch a few torpedoes. If we can punch a hole in their defenses, your ships can do the rest." Zorian considered for a moment, then nodded. "It's a good plan, risky, but it's the best we've got. Let's do it." The Odyssey and the remnants of the Zephyrian fleet moved into position, their engines thrumming with power. They knew that this was a desperate gamble, that the odds of success were slim. But they also knew that they had no choice. The fate of an entire world hung in the balance. The Kragoth ships loomed before them, a wall of metal and flesh and hatred. Reeves gripped the arms of his chair, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "Fire," he said. The Odyssey's torpedoes leapt from their tubes, streaking toward the Kragoth command ship. The enemy's point defenses opened up, filling the void with flak and laser fire, but the torpedoes bore on, unwavering. The first salvo went wide, detonating harmlessly against the command ship's shields. But the second found its mark, blasting through the weakened defenses and slamming into the hull. Explosions rippled across the ship's surface, secondary blasts tearing through its innards. For a moment, the Kragoth fleet wavered, its coordination faltering as the command ship listed and burned. The Zephyrian ships seized the opportunity, surging forward to press the attack. Lasers and missiles rained down upon the enemy, tearing into their ranks. But the Kragoth recovered quickly, their ships closing ranks around their stricken leader. They turned their weapons on the Odyssey, determined to exact revenge for the blow that had been struck against them. The human ship shuddered under the onslaught, its shields flaring and failing. Consoles exploded, sending showers of sparks cascading across the bridge. Reeves held on grimly, his face bathed in the red glow of emergency lighting. Reeves gritted his teeth. The Odyssey was tough, but she wasn't invincible. They couldn't take much more of this punishment. "Reroute power from the engines," he ordered. "Get those shields back up." But even as he spoke, he knew it was futile. The Kragoth were too many, their weapons too powerful. The Odyssey was a science vessel, not a warship. She had never been meant for this kind of battle. And yet, she had held her own. She had struck a blow against the enemy, had given the Zephyrians a fighting chance. If they could just hold out a little longer. Another blast rocked the ship, sending Reeves sprawling from his chair. He hauled himself up, his head ringing, his vision blurred. The bridge was in chaos, alarms blaring, crew members shouting over the din. And then he saw it. The Kragoth command ship looming before them like a mountain of metal. Its shields were down, its hull battered and torn, but it was still firing, still raining death upon the Odyssey and her allies. Reeves knew what he had to do. It was a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to buy time for the reinforcements to arrive, but it was the only chance they had. He turned to his crew, his face grim with determination. "Abandon ship," he said. "Get to the escape pods. I'll stay and pilot the Odyssey." There was a moment of stunned silence, then a chorus of protests. They would not leave him, they said. They would stand and fight to the end. But Reeves shook his head. "No," he said. "This is the only way. If we don't stop that command ship, the Zephyrians are doomed, and Earth will be next." He met their eyes, one by one, seeing the fear and the resolve mingled there. "It's been an honor serving with you," he said. "Now go, while there's still time." Slowly, reluctantly, they obeyed. They filed out of the bridge, heading for the escape pods that would carry them to safety. Zorian lingered for a moment, clasping Reeves's hand in a warrior's grip. "You are a brave man, Captain," he said. "Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." Reeves nodded, his throat tight. "Just make sure it counts," he said. "Make sure the Zephyrians survive." And then he was alone, the bridge silent save for the crackling of shattered consoles and the distant thunder of the battle raging outside. He took a deep breath, then settled into the pilot's chair. The Odyssey was a wreck, her systems failing, her engines sputtering, but she had one last mission to complete, one last sacrifice to make. Reeves aimed her toward the Kragoth command ship, the massive vessel filling his view screen. He could see the enemy's weapons turning to track him, could feel the heat of their targeting lasers on his skin. But he didn't falter. He pushed the engines to full power, the Odyssey leaping forward like a wounded animal making its final charge. The Kragoth fired, their beams slicing through the void, but he jinked and dodged, his hands flying over the controls. Closer and closer he came, the command ship looming before him like a wall of metal. The Kragoth realized his intent, tried to pull away, but it was too late. The Odyssey slammed into the enemy vessel, her hull crumpling, her engines exploding in a blaze of light. The command ship shuddered, secondary explosions rippling through its frame, and then, with a final titanic blast, it tore itself apart. The shockwave of the explosion washed over the Kragoth fleet, sending their ships tumbling and spinning. Their coordination shattered, their leadership gone. They fell into disarray. Some tried to flee. Others turned on each other in confusion and fear. And in that moment of chaos, the Zephyrian ships struck. They dove into the fray, their weapons blazing, taking advantage of the enemy's weakness. They knew that this was their chance, their one opportunity to turn the tide of battle. From the escape pods, the crew of the Odyssey watched in awe as the Zephyrians fought on, their ships darting and weaving through the Kragoth lines. They had bought them this chance, Reeves and his crew. They had sacrificed everything to give them a fighting chance. And now, as the battle raged on, as the fate of a world hung in the balance, they could only hope that their sacrifice had not been in vain. The shockwave from the exploding Kragoth command ship rocked the escape pods, sending the surviving Odyssey crew members tumbling against each other. Reeves gripped the edge of his seat, his knuckles white, as he watched the massive vessel disintegrate into a cloud of debris. The sacrifice had been made, and now all they could do was hope that it had been enough. As if in answer to their prayers, a fleet of Zephyrian ships appeared, their sleek forms cutting through the void like silver arrows. At their head was Commander Zorian's flagship, the Avenger, its guns already blazing as it engaged the disoriented Kragoth forces. "We're being hailed," the communications officer reported, her voice trembling with relief. "It's Commander Zorian." Reeves nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude as the Zephyrian commander's face appeared on the screen. "Captain Reeves," Zorian said, his voice urgent, "we're bringing your pods aboard. Prepare for retrieval." The escape pods shuddered as the Avenger's tractor beams locked onto them, pulling them into the safety of the ship's hangar bay. As the pods touched down, the doors hissed open, and Reeves stumbled out, blinking in the bright light. Zorian was there to greet him, his hand outstretched. "You've done it, Captain," he said, his eyes shining with admiration. "You've given us a chance." Reeves clasped the commander's hand, his throat tight with emotion. "We did it together," he said. "The Odyssey crew, the Zephyrians. We all fought as one." But even as they spoke, the battle raged on around them. The Kragoth had recovered from their initial shock and were regrouping, their ships forming up in a tight defensive formation. They knew that they had been dealt a serious blow, but they were far from defeated. Reeves turned to Zorian, his jaw set with determination. "We have to keep fighting," he said. "We have to hold them off until—" And then, as if in answer to his words, a new wave of ships appeared on the horizon. But these were not Kragoth vessels, with their jagged lines and pulsing weapons. These were human ships, sleek and powerful, their hulls gleaming in the starlight. "Admiral Vance," Reeves breathed, his heart soaring with hope. "He made it." The human fleet swept forward, their guns already firing as they engaged the Kragoth. The enemy ships tried to rally, tried to form a defensive line, but they were outmatched and outgunned. The human vessels tore through their ranks like wolves among sheep, their advanced weaponry cutting swathes of destruction through the Kragoth fleet. Reeves watched the battle unfold, his heart pounding with adrenaline. He knew that they had a chance now, that with the human reinforcements they could turn the tide of the war. But he also knew that the fight was far from over. As if reading his thoughts, Zorian turned to him, his face grim. "The Kragoth flagship," he said, pointing to a massive vessel that loomed in the distance. "Admiral Zorax is there, coordinating the attack. If we can take him out—" Reeves nodded, understanding what the commander was suggesting. It was a daring plan, a desperate gamble, but he knew that it was their only chance. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady. "I'll lead the assault on the flagship." Zorian hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'll have a fighter prepped for you," he said, "and I'll be right beside you every step of the way." Minutes later, Reeves was strapped into the cockpit of a Zephyrian fighter, his hands gripping the controls with a familiar sense of purpose. Zorian's ship was beside him, the commander's face appearing on his comm screen. "Ready?" Zorian asked, his voice crackling over the channel. Reeves nodded, his eyes narrowing with determination. "Let's do this," he said. Together they launched from the hangar bay, their ships streaking toward the Kragoth flagship like arrows loosed from a bow. The enemy vessel loomed before them, its guns already swiveling to track their approach. But Reeves and Zorian were too fast, too skilled. They dodged and weaved through the incoming fire, their own weapons blazing in response. They focused their attack on the flagship's weak points, targeting its engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. The flagship shuddered under the onslaught, its shields flickering and failing. Reeves saw his chance and took it, diving toward the massive vessel with reckless abandon. Zorian followed close behind, his own ship dancing through the void like a leaf on the wind. They breached the flagship's hull, skidding to a halt in its massive hangar bay. Reeves leaped from his cockpit, his weapon already in hand. Zorian was beside him, his own gun at the ready. Together they fought their way through the ship, cutting down Kragoth warriors with ruthless efficiency. They moved with a single purpose, a shared determination to end this war once and for all. And then at last they reached the bridge. Admiral Zorax was there, his massive form hunched over a glowing tactical display. He looked up as Reeves and Zorian burst through the doors, his eyes narrowing with rage. "Trus," he snarled, his voice dripping with hatred, "you think you can stop me? You think you can defeat the Kragoth Empire?" Reeves stepped forward, his weapon leveled at the Admiral's chest. "We already have," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Your fleet is in ruins, your command ship destroyed. It's over, Zorax." The Admiral let out a roar of fury, his hand reaching for his own weapon. But Reeves was faster, his finger tightening on the trigger. The gun kicked in his hand, and Zorax stumbled back, a look of shock and disbelief on his face. And then he fell, his massive form crumpling to the deck like a puppet with its strings cut. Reeves stood over him, his chest heaving with exertion and emotion. Zorian was at his side, his own face a mask of grim satisfaction. Around them, the flagship shuddered and bucked, the sounds of battle still raging outside. But Reeves knew that it was only a matter of time now. With Zorax dead and their command structure in disarray, the Kragoth would have no choice but to retreat. He turned to Zorian, his hand outstretched. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for everything." The Zephyrian commander clasped his hand, his own eyes shining with gratitude. "No," he said, shaking his head. "Thank you, Captain Reeves. Thank you for giving us hope. Thank you for saving my people." Together they made their way back to the hangar bay, their steps heavy with exhaustion but their hearts light with victory. They had done it. Against all odds, against overwhelming force, they had stood together and fought. And they had won. As they emerged from the flagship, the scene before them took Reeves' breath away. The Kragoth fleet was in full retreat, their ships limping away from the battle like wounded animals. The human and Zephyrian vessels pursued them, harrying their flanks and picking off stragglers. And in the distance, the Zephyrian homeworld hung in space, its surface scarred and battered but still unbroken, still alive, still free. Reeves felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Admiral Vance standing beside him, his face lined with pride and relief. "You did it, Captain," he said, his voice warm with admiration. "You saved them. You saved us all." Reeves shook his head, his eyes stinging with sudden tears. "We did it, sir," he said, "all of us, the Odyssey crew, the Zephyrians, the fleet. We all fought together. We all made this happen." Vance nodded, his own eyes glistening with emotion. "And we'll keep fighting," he said, his voice firm with conviction, "until the Kragoth are defeated, until the galaxy is safe. We'll keep fighting, together." Reeves looked out at the stars, at the ships and the planets and the endless expanse of space. And he knew that Vance was right. They had won a great victory today, but the war was far from over. There would be more battles to come, more sacrifices to be made. But they would face them together, humans and Zephyrians, united in purpose and resolve. They would face them with courage and determination, with the knowledge that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. They would face them as one and they would triumph, no matter the odds, no matter the cost. They would fight and they would win. For the galaxy, for their peoples, for the future. They would fight and they would never surrender. The battle was over, but the war had only just begun. The Kragoth ships scattered like leaves in a storm, their formation broken and their resolve shattered. The once mighty warships fled before the advancing human and Zephyrian forces, their engines straining as they sought to escape the system. Reeves watched from the bridge of a Zephyrian cruiser, his heart pounding with a mixture of elation and exhaustion. On the viewscreen, the Allied ships pursued the retreating Kragoth, their weapons flashing as they picked off stragglers and crippled enemy vessels. The Zephyrian crews cheered with each successful hit, their voices filled with a fierce joy that Reeves had never heard before. "We did it," Zorian said, his voice thick with emotion. "We actually did it." Reeves nodded, his own eyes stinging with tears. "We didn't just win a battle," he said. "We won a war." The cruiser shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of the Zephyrian homeworld, the once verdant landscape scarred by the ravages of orbital bombardment. But even amidst the destruction, Reeves could see signs of life and resilience. The Zephyrian cities still stood, their spires reaching defiantly towards the sky. As the ship touched down on a landing pad, Reeves and Zorian were greeted by a sea of cheering Zephyrians. The crowd surged forward, their hands outstretched in gratitude and celebration. Reeves found himself being lifted onto the shoulders of a group of soldiers, their faces beaming with pride and admiration. "Hail the human hero," they chanted. "Hail the savior of Zephyria." Reeves flushed with embarrassment, but he couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as well. He had come so far since that fateful day, when the Odyssey had first detected the Kragoth invasion fleet. He had faced impossible odds and made unthinkable sacrifices, but in the end, he had prevailed. As the celebration continued, Zorian made his way to the center of the crowd, his voice booming over the din. "My people," he said, his eyes shining with emotion. "Today, we stand victorious over our greatest foe, but we did not achieve this victory alone." He turned to Reeves, his hand outstretched. "The humans have proven themselves to be our truest friends and allies. They fought beside us, bled with us, and sacrificed everything to ensure our survival. From this day forward, let it be known that the Zephyrians and the humans are one people, united in friendship and common purpose." The crowd erupted in cheers, and Reeves felt a lump form in his throat. He had never imagined that he would be part of something so much larger than himself, that he would forge a bond with an alien race that would endure for generations to come. As the celebration wound down, Admiral Vance arrived on the planet's surface, his uniform crisp and his face lined with pride. He made his way to Reeves and Zorian, his hand extended in congratulations. "You did it," he said, his voice warm with admiration. "Against all odds, you held the line and saved billions of lives. The UESC owes you a debt that can never be repaid." Reeves shook his head. "We all did our part, Admiral," he said. "The Odyssey crew, the Zephyrians, the fleet, we all fought together." Vance smiled. "And we'll keep fighting," he said, "until the Kragoth are defeated once and for all." As the Admiral turned to speak with Zorian, Reeves found himself lost in thought. The victory over the Kragoth had been hard won, but he knew that it was only the beginning of a much longer struggle. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, filled with threats, both known and unknown. He thought of the Odyssey crew, of the brave men and women who had given their lives to protect the Zephyrians. He thought of the sacrifices that had been made, and the sacrifices that would still need to be made in the battles to come. But he also thought of the bonds that had been forged, of the friendships that had been made in the heat of battle. He thought of Zorian and the Zephyrians, of the unbreakable alliance that had been forged between their two peoples. And he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The Kragoth may have been defeated here, but they were still out there waiting and plotting their next move. They were a ruthless and determined enemy, one that would stop at nothing to crush all who opposed them. But Reeves was determined too. He had seen the face of true evil, and he had stared it down without blinking. He had fought against impossible odds and emerged victorious. And he would do so again, as many times as it took to keep Earth and its allies safe. As he looked up at the stars, he felt a sense of purpose settle over him like a mantle. He knew that his journey was far from over, that there would be more battles to fight and more sacrifices to make. But he also knew that he was ready for whatever lay ahead. He had the strength of his convictions, the support of his allies, and the courage to face any challenge that the galaxy could throw at him. He took a deep breath of the alien air, feeling the cool breeze on his skin. The war may have been won, but the fight was just beginning. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support me, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. And for every comment that says, "I liked the story," I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.